Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a deeply personal mystery, and honestly, it's one that affects every single one of us. We're going to look at the absolute very beginning of your existence, specifically those first 3 years. You were there, right? You lived them, but you remember almost none of it. Not your first steps, not your first words, not even the room you slept in, or the faces of the people who held you literally every single day. The moments that shaped you more than almost anything else that came after, they're just simply gone. It's kind of wild. It's actually one of the strangest things neuroscience has ever uncovered, and today we're going to unpack exactly why this happens.
Take a second right now and actually search your own mind. Where are your earliest memories? Try to recall the actual feeling of taking your very first steps, or try to picture the exact face of the person who fed you and held you every single day when you were, say, 6 months old. You can't do it, can you? It's a pretty striking realization when you think about it. Those rich, incredibly foundational moments of your life are completely inaccessible to you right now.
So, let's dive into this. Those early years are essentially like a locked door inside your own mind. And here is the absolutely crucial thing to understand right off the bat. These memories aren't just misplaced in some dusty, forgotten corner of your brain. No, they are entirely gone. The experiences definitely happened, but the record of them vanished. Poof. For over a century, this phenomenon has completely puzzled researchers, and the truth behind that locked door is absolutely fascinating.
Now, for a really long time, Sigmund Freud famously theorized that this missing time meant our early memories were repressed, that we were subconsciously hiding them from ourselves. But, as it turns out, that's a complete myth. The reality is much more biological and, honestly, a little bit more unsettling. You weren't just forgetting things as you grew up, something in your brain was actively preventing those memories from forming in the first place. No way around it.
And that brings us to infantile amnesia. That's the scientific term for why you can't remember being a baby. And here is the part that makes some people a little uncomfortable, but it's really essential to understand. You were not unconscious during the first 3 years of your life, not at all. You were completely awake. You were experiencing everything. You felt pain, warmth, hunger, love, fear, comfort. You felt all of it. Fully, in real time. You just couldn't store it.
Think of your infant brain as a camera with no film. The structure that's absolutely critical to forming long-term declarative memories, the kind of memories you can consciously recall and actually narrate to someone else, that's the hippocampus. But in a human infant, the hippocampus is extraordinarily underdeveloped. It just doesn't reach the structural maturity needed to encode durable autobiographical memories until somewhere between ages 2 and 4. So the shutter opens, the light enters, the experience is processed. But because the film isn't there yet, absolutely nothing gets captured.
The main reason for this comes down to a biological process called neurogenesis, which is just the rapid birth of new neurons. During your first few years, your brain is pumping out new neurons faster than at any other point in your entire life. The goal here is absolutely vital, right? It's building the brain's physical structure. But there's a massive side effect. It literally bulldozes your memories. Every single time a new neuron integrates into the network, it completely rewires the local connections around it. It's like your brain is an active construction site. Think about it. You can't safely store files in an office building while the walls are still being knocked down and rebuilt. Any memory trace that even starts to form gets immediately interrupted and bulldozed by the next round of structural development.
And this isn't just some abstract theory. There was an incredibly fascinating study led by neuroscientist Paul Franklin over at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto that proved this directly. By artificially increasing the rate of neurogenesis in adult mice, the researchers found that these adult mice actually began to forget recent memories at infant-like rates. The more new neurons they generated, the more they forgot. So the very mechanism that builds your memory system is the exact same mechanism that actively prevents your early memories from surviving. Mind-blowing, right?
But, the hippocampus is really only half the story here. Autobiographical memory actually requires a narrator, a sense of self that can say, hey, I was there, this happened to me. From ages 0 to 2, you have this pure, incredibly rich experience, but you have zero verbal architecture to make sense of it. You don't have words for your feelings, and you definitely don't have the sentence structure to sequence events. It's only around ages 2.5 to 3 that language acquisition really builds the framework for a continuous personal identity. And perfectly in sync with that, right around age 3.5, we start to see the emergence of the first retrievable autobiographical memories. Basically, before language, experience just flows through the brain and right out. After language, it can actually be caught, named, and kept.
So, the crucial point is this staggering reality. You were there for all of it. You just can't get back in.
I want to pause for a second and just let that sink in. You were entirely present for the absolute most helpless, dependent years of your life, a time when the people around you made enormous impressions on your developing brain. These rich experiences flowed right through you, but you simply couldn't keep them.
Now, we need to make a massive pivot here, because just because you can't consciously remember those years absolutely does not mean they didn't shape you. In fact, neuroscience increasingly suggests they shaped you more than almost anything that came after. How? Well, through implicit memories. These are procedural and emotional traces written directly into your nervous system. They operate entirely below your conscious recall. You don't remember learning these lessons, but they are absolutely 100% there. 1 million. Just think about that number. That is the staggering amount of new neural connections your brain was forming every single second during those first 3 years. Every single second. So while your conscious memory was completely offline, your nervous system was furiously writing the underlying code for exactly how you would interact with the world. Your brain was fundamentally changeable by experience at an unbelievable rate.
Which brings us right back to our locked door metaphor. You can't open the door to see the memories, sure, but everything that came through that door is already in the room with you right now. The attachment patterns you developed with your caregivers, whether the world felt generally safe or generally dangerous, whether crying brought comfort or was just ignored, all of these things got hard-written into your nervous system. Those early traces are literally running your responses to stress, intimacy, and uncertainty today.
Now you might be wondering, why do some people seem to remember things from when they were like 2.5 while others have a total blank slate until they're 5 or 6? Well, research shows there's actually a wide variation, and it really comes down to a few key factors. The first one is language acquisition speed. Children who develop a rich verbal vocabulary earlier tend to have earlier accessible memories, simply because that verbal scaffolding goes up sooner. Makes sense, right?
The second factor is cultural context, and honestly, this one is truly fascinating. Studies have looked at indigenous Maori communities in New Zealand. In Maori culture, there's this enormous, beautiful emphasis on oral storytelling and personal history. And because of this cultural practice, Maori participants actually report their earliest memories dating from roughly 6 months earlier on average compared to Western populations.
What this shows us is that memory isn't just an individual biological process. It's highly social. Parents narrating experiences back to their children literally helps construct those retrievable memories. The cultural practice of rehearsing and retelling early experiences actually strengthens the encoding of memories that would otherwise just be bulldozed by neurogenesis. When adults talked to you, asked you questions, and built a narrative framework with you, they were practically handing you the tools to keep those memories alive. The final factor is emotional intensity. Highly stressful or really frightening events can sometimes punch right through that amnesia barrier. But they don't usually survive as full episodic memories, like a movie playing in your head. Instead, they leave fragmentary traces or emotional responses attached to certain stimuli. For instance, you probably won't remember the large dog that bit you when you were 2 years old, but you might spend the rest of your entire adult life feeling inexplicably uncomfortable around large dogs without ever actually knowing why. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Everything that happened to you during those incredibly formative years, every hand that held you, every moment of fear or deep safety, it's all locked behind a door your adult mind will never open. But none of it is gone. It's stored in the way your body responds before your mind even catches up. It's in the patterns of connection you just keep recreating. Your earliest self is still in there, running the show from behind the scenes. Which really leaves us with one final kind of haunting question. If you are shaped entirely by a version of yourself you can't even remember, how well do you actually know who you are? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.